in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved, and we can sign those when we get far enough along. Next order of business would be the Dudley Charlton Regional.
Sign them?
Yeah, in the back. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay, you're on.
Oh, great, okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Doble, and I appreciate everybody giving us the opportunity to be here. Like I said to Jerry before the meeting, it was kind of a cruel joke that as I'm walking in, I see a car with an Aruba license plate out front, honestly. Aruba, of all places, so.
That's mine. Why? What's your problem with it?
Well, I don't want to be thinking about Aruba tonight, not until later. But anyway, we appreciate the opportunity. What I was hoping, and I'm sure that you'll have questions, and we want to make sure that we're able to just explain to you where we stand, what our situation is, give you the information firsthand, and have you be able to ask any questions that you have of us, so that we all know where the other stands as we move forward. Tonight, I'll start with what we have a meeting at 7 o'clock tonight, so I'm going to have to hustle out of here pretty quickly. If there are a lot of questions, Mr. Chalk and Mrs. Rabbit are prepared to stay longer if necessary. But tonight, we are bringing forward another proposal to reduce our budget. It will come primarily from a small increase in state funding through the House budget and another commitment from the district reserves. I want to be clear that after tonight, we can't commit any more of our reserves. We will have, excuse me, we'll have 1.1 million out of 1.3 million that was certified, committed to our operating budget for next year, which leaves us feeling, pretty exposed in our excess and deficiency account. And we'll have every dollar of our school choice reserve accounted for, applied to operating for next year's budget. So after tonight, we understand we're still going to have to reduce the budget further, but it's going to have to come from a combination of position cuts and the hope that there'll be some reductions through either the state Senate budget or, which is unlikely, but you can hope, or maybe health insurance or something like that. But so we're in a tough spot. If I believe what I read and what I hear, I understand that the town, as of right now, has us at a position where we have the same increase over the minimum as last year. Is that accurate? Is that terminology make sense? Or I want to make sure that I'm using the same terminology that you guys use. Okay, so last year, that 335 over the minimum, we were so grateful because, the state was good to us last year, and so we felt like that was, that gave us an opportunity to have a pretty decent budget year. This year, because of a reduction in state funding for us, it isn't gonna go as far as what we had hoped. And so we have asked, I have asked Mrs. Craver and Mr. Belliakonis and Dudley for additional monies over that number. And I wanna be clear that everyone on our school committee is appreciative of what you were able to do for us last year. And we understand that what we're asking stretches you a lot. I mean, for lack of a better term. So I wanna be clear that we don't feel like anybody's holding out or being greedy or anything like that, and I hope you feel the same way, because we wouldn't ask if we didn't have to. But to get just the number over the minimum that we got last year would be a devastating scenario for our district that I don't know that our school committee would be able to accept, not because we don't appreciate anything over the minimum, but because it would mean 13, 14 position cuts, and that's what we have. That's all that we've identified so far. After those 13 or 14 position cuts, there would still be another $400,000 that we haven't even thought about how to cut yet. So it would really be a devastating situation that would affect the classroom. So basically, The problem, as I think everybody knows, exists because the funding formula shifted. Well, it exists because we all have a revenue issue, but it also exists because the funding formula shifted many years ago, so the state's responsibility reduced and the towns would pick up the slack for that. We finally, I think, have hit the year where the door really slammed on us. And we were just talking about a little bit before the meeting in our budget subcommittee that we feel like if you can project based on the way things have gone in the past, it's only gonna get worse. And so if we don't figure out as a group some kind of a revenue solution in the future, I won't say any bad words up here tonight that start with an O, but if we don't figure something out, we're gonna be back here next year asking for even more over the minimum and understanding with heavy hearts that we're asking you a lot, but we don't wanna deconstruct the district for our students. So we've gotta figure something out. We have another challenge, which is that because we know we have to figure something out, and I think we all agree that working together on that is going to give us a better chance of success than being divided. We're really hopeful as a school committee and a leadership team that we can find some compromise between where we are now and where you are now, so that we can go into the town meeting with a number that works for everybody. I wanted to make sure that I said that, and we are certainly available to answer any of your questions. Mrs. Rabbit is an expert on the contribution formula, the one that's getting us so much this year. And so if there are any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Now, from what I can see on the education, we're gonna give you an extra, another increase of 292,000?
Hold on, Jerry, let me make sure I have the proper.
Is that right, Robin?
You have for the operating, there's an increase of 192,108, and for the transportation, there's an increase of 92,630.
Oh, that's right, the other one is Bay Path, never mind. So that's roughly 284,000. And that's just for you, that's just for Dudley and not Bay Path.
I'm not sure I'm understanding. Can you?
Oh, no, when I started, I had
Okay.
the total education budget, which includes Bay Path.
Yeah, okay.
So, 284 is about the one, we're giving you for an increase right at the moment, anyway.
Over the minimum.
You're talking about 284 over the minimum.
Over
or
last year.
Altogether. Right now, as the budget stands, well, we probably shouldn't even talk about it as it stands, because it's gonna change so much from there. As you have it right now, it's 192,
Yep,
then 60,000 for busing.
transportation was 92.
Right now, what I'm carrying for transportation
Okay.
is $1,050,099. Is that different than what you have now?
Yeah, it's a little less than that, actually, but it's 1,018,400.
Oh, that's an old one. Did you,
Just got like 2 seconds ago.
oh, did it change again?
This is the one, Robin, this budget you just handed us is the one,
Is the one that you guys voted on.
Right.
There was only one change, which was I had to increase the snow and ice, so I increased the
that's got Dudley Child Transportation at $1,034,000.
134.
Yes.
1034.
1034, which is different than the 1,018,000.
Yeah, and-
Let's see which one I had. Okay, so I apologize, because I've got a thumb drive, I've got.
We're gonna take yours.
Yeah.
All right, so what I have in there, the last budget that I did, let me just go to the written budget, because that's the one, now I'm not sure.
What, that's line item 268 on
So
ARPA.
what,
Jerry, is there another copy of that?
is that the 130, so it's
Line
still
item
going down.
268.
Okay, so there's 192, 108 for the operating.
Yeah.
There's 76,697, that was the last.
That's the increase.
That's the increase.
So there's a difference of about 16,000 in what we have.
And you're saying right now it's 1,018,000?
Yes. Which means a 60,000,
That's your 16,000.
yeah.
You're 1,034,000. We're at 1,018,000.
Even?
It is, you're right.
It's
Yeah, I gotta fix that one again.
400,000.
Mrs. Craver makes a good point, that it is still a moving target, so estimating it a little high isn't a bad idea, you know?
No, I try to keep track of these, but
Well, it's hard, because every other week the state comes out with a little bit of a change, so it is difficult, but we're in the ballpark. So your original, overall increase, was something like $250,000+, around there, okay. And that's the budget that I was referring to, that would require us to cut over another $1 million from where we are tonight, even after tonight's meeting, which would be and it's, again, it's because of such a limited amount of income from the state, because that formula finally caught up with us. And a lot of what you're dealing with on this side is also related to what happens in Dudley. And so Dudley is really behind, and they got hit with a really high increase. So the state really did a number on them, even more so. So we gotta keep that in mind too, that it's, as a regional district, what happens there affects you here as well. So, you know, that would be just,
When you say 13 to 14 positions, could you just kind of give us an overview of what kind of positions?
I will, certainly without giving away anything, because,
Yes.
because the individuals affected haven't been formally spoken to, but, you're talking about, it would be 4 part-time positions, 9 full-time positions, which are, you know, variety, classroom.
So the,
They're
I
real
was just
people.
looking for the
They're real.
classrooms versus custodians versus.
No, there's some of those mixed in as well. It is a variety, but there are a significant number of classroom positions as well. And 1 proposed position, which is, basically we're trying to, we made a major cut in our mental health department last year. We're gonna try to restore that with an adjustment counselor, which is, for us, it's an essential position. It's not something that we wanna do, we feel like it's something we have to do. Because anybody in this business will tell you that the increase in the number of students coming to us with mental and emotional health challenges is astronomical every year. And we don't have an adjustment counselor. And our counselor to student ratio at Shepherd Hill is, it should be double, it should be half of what it is. So we're in non-compliance, but we're never gonna get to that point, but we need to move in a better direction there as well. So somewhere between where we are and where that is, we are just truly, truly hopeful that we can find some kind of a compromise. And we understand that, you know, we live in the town and we love the town. We don't want you to have to deconstruct the town. We really don't. And so we wanna work with you on this, but I think from where it stands right now would be very difficult for our committee.
So how much more from the roughly 250,000, how much more do you need or want?
Well, I mean, I can give you a number, and I don't know if Mrs. Craver did this last week, maybe, probably not, but the number that we're working with Dudley on would be an equivalent additional 275 above the 250 for Charlton. And we know that's a lot, we do. That's what I call the point of some return. In other words, we would still have to cut several of the positions that I mentioned earlier, but we would be able to maintain a couple of the more core classroom instruction positions that you could make the argument are more, you know, quote-unquote essential.
290 now. I'm out.
250.
We're giving them 260, yeah,
Nah.
now, and they want 275 more.
If an overall increase.
13?
Yeah, like
And then
530 or
if we give them the money,
yeah, okay,
that would be,
okay.
He said four part-time,
One
4 full, 9 full-time.
yeah, I don't
9
know.
full-time, 4 part-time.
9 full-time you're talking about?
That's what we're gonna be talking about, yeah.
One town gives you an increase over and above, and the other doesn't, you're gonna be in just as bad a position.
Right, it's linked. It's almost like an all or nothing proposition to some degree. So, you know, that is a number that we feel would be, you know, we would be tremendously grateful. I know it's a lot. If there's any way that can happen without tearing the town apart, we'd be really grateful. But we understand that you've gotta do what you've gotta do, and we hope that we can keep the communication open.
Making the assumption too that you wouldn't only be cutting positions, you've probably got programs or other things.
How much would that increase if you did all 13 class sizes?
Well, it would
Which
be,
which levels would be increased? You know, would it be 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade?
it would be grade specific, so you know, if you
Yeah.
talk about a position at Shepherd Hill, it's more of a subject area thing. So that subject area, the other teachers would have to pick up, you know,
Or
five more
Or
students.
the course might be dropped.
Correct, that could happen. Yeah, I haven't thought it through that far, and then the other thing is, one of them would be an elementary school grade. That would be over 20, at least over 20. Right now, it's at 26, and, it would be at least 26 plus if we had to cut that position.
How's the population of the students? Is that increasing from the first grade up, or is it starting to decline a little bit on the earlier grades?
It's pretty stable, really. It's give or take, pretty much every year. It's relatively stable. We're always around 4,000 as a
Yeah.
district.
Okay.
I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that some of the cuts we're making are capital improvements that we made in previous years. So these problems are not getting any better, they just continue to get worse. You know, we've got a roof problem at Charlton Middle, we keep patching it. It's gonna be a point where next year we're probably going to replace that roof. A huge expense. So we're doing what we can do to keep the schools open and keep them nice, but in some cases, I think that hurts us, that we're doing that. It's probably not seen by most people, but these are problems that are real and have to be fixed at some point in time. And that's what we're cutting now. We're cutting those types of things out of the budget, that we can't keep doing that, and have good buildings.
Robin, would that be a bond issue if we did it next year?
Be a debt exclusion.
Yeah.
You said earlier that this is the year that the door, I forget the expression that
I
you
think I
used,
said
okay?
slammed on us, yeah.
But it almost makes it sound like next year we're gonna be right back here, talking about the same issues.
I
and
believe
the
we
numbers
will.
are gonna be
Yeah.
incrementally
Even bigger
bigger.
number.
I
It's
said I would
double
not,
what you wanted from last year.
I'm sorry?
It's double what was from last year.
So,
And if I'm not mistaken, the school takes 3% of our increase.
I don't remember the number.
Around,
Remember
it was
last
pretty
year?
close to 3%.
Yeah.
We take a
No,
lot, we know we take a lot.
Robin,
So
Robin,
you're already
right.
taking
You said that wrong.
more than we're getting in. So we're already cutting positions in the town to get the 250 you were giving you. I just don't know where this ends.
so can I, this is, through the chair, can I?
Yeah.
Just kind of make a statement. I think since I've been on the committee, this is something that we've talked about, and we've talked about every year. So I think it's important for the people in the town to recognize, first and foremost, we don't set the amount of money that the towns have to pay for education. That is a number that is set by the state. And the target share that the state of Massachusetts expects each town or city to contribute to education is 82.5% of education costs. So when this funding formula was put into place, every town or city had their baseline that was established. Every year, the state comes and wants to bring you closer to where that 82.5% is. So right now, between Charlton and Dudley, they're both in the 50% range. So the amount that's going to be asked of each town to contribute is always going to continue to increase until everybody gets to that place where they're at 82.5%. So when we sit here to you on a yearly basis, and the number that your minimum local contribution is a number that's established by the state. And the state's objective is to get every city and town to 82.5%. So right now, not having the number off the top of my head, Charlton is around 56%. So when we sit here and we talk about the fact that that number, each year we're coming and asking you for more money, we are not asking you for more money. The state is turning around and saying this is the minimum that we expect the town to contribute to education.
Can you just explain to me the 82.5% of what number?
It's the number that they turn around. There's a very complex foundation formula of how they turn around and determine how much it costs to have a student in high school, a student in elementary school, how much extra you get for a student that's an English language learner, a student that is economically disadvantaged, a special education student. It's a very complex formula. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the fact that there's been a Foundation Budget Review Commission that has met over the last 2 years, because that formula has not been changed in 20 years. And when that formula was established, it did not address the growing escalation of health insurance costs that have really crippled the costs of health insurance, the cost of special education. So that particular commission has determined a report that they're looking to adjust the formula to be more respective of current costs of today. But to fix the formula, it's going to cost approximately $2 billion to the state to fix and get everybody kind of settled to where they need to be. So that's going to be a very long-range project to addressing some of the costs that we incur. Our health insurance costs, like everyone like you have here in the town, are a huge chunk of your budget. So that's a long-term solution that the legislature is trying to target. How do we find the funding to come back and attach, you know, some change to that? But the expectation is that 50% of a town's budget is going to be for education. Our budget is bigger than your budget. We are the largest employer in town. You know, we service the children of the town. It's our investment in the future. So the thing that we struggle with is, as a committee, is looking at this as we can fix this year, but ultimately that number is never going to be more favorable to the town, because the number is always going to get bigger. And the minimum was never designed to be the full cost of education. There are many districts with the Commonwealth that put much more money into it than what that minimum local contribution is. So part of, I think, what Mr. Desto was driving in the conversation was, it's not just what we're looking at as far as the costs of today, but the realization that that number in this conversation that we have is going to continue every year, because that's not going to change. That number is going to continue to grow bigger. Until they fix the formula. And I'll sidetrack to the MLC number in just a second, but one of the things, since I've been on the school committee since 2011, this has always been a conversation. I know, was it 3 or 4 years ago that we ended up cutting over 29 positions we had to cut. Okay, because we have this problem. We come to you, we try and do the best. We've sat down with members of both community. We designed a strategic plan with over 100 people in attendance of where we wanted our education for our students and our community to go going forward. It's been very difficult to even approach some of those objectives that we aligned in the strategic plan for what we were trying to do. So we have creatively tried to address our budget needs and try and create some kind of growth in the district. Last year, we had to sacrifice a position at the high school in order to put a position in the high school. We are not growing positions by adding to it. We're growing or adding a position by the fact that we're taking something else away that we've deemed, you know, less of a priority, to put something else in so that we can at least try and go forward. As an attempt to meet the technology needs that we are mandated to provide to our students, to meet the testing requirements for standardized testing, which we have to be in place by 2019. Technology is a very common theme that we've talked about on town meeting floor. We're not even close to the network capability nor the device capability. So our business manager, Mr. Matthew, came up with a very creative approach that we approved at our last meeting, which is, instead of trying to acquire this and coming to you looking for debt exclusion to do some of this work, We have made the decision to lease the equipment for the next 4 years, which is going to allow us to take the items that we were looking for in this budget and get closer to the 2019 requirement by doing a leasing option for 4 years. That was a savings, I believe, of $289,000 to the budget request that we're doing this year. So we're trying to work extremely creatively to try and provide, an education, a quality education. And I am very careful about using the word and defining the word quality education, because we're not providing the education that our students certainly should receive. In the state of Massachusetts, we are second from the bottom of regional school districts for what we spend on a per pupil. And there's a difference between $50 between the very bottom and where we are. And I believe the number is we're 10th from the bottom of 351 districts in the state for what we spend per pupil for students. So I think it's important to understand that. So Mr. Desto's point in us coming before you tonight, and as we have done joint financial meetings, is collectively as towns, as a school district, we really need to look at not just the immediate need that we have for our budget, but we really need to look at how do we long-range plan, because we came so close this year, and we are really in the viewpoint of how the budget is looked at by the towns to the school request. We are at the point right now that minimum local contribution that is being mandated that you provide to the district is going to swallow more than your new revenue. We're at that point. So unless we have some kind of collective viewpoint of how we go forward and we look at this, next year could be the year that we come to you and the minimum local contribution is more money than you have. And you have to provide the school's budget, and then it's at the detriment to the town. And we work in conjunction with us. Most of our staff live and work in our community. It's our students, it's our future. And I know that everyone has a passion and a care for making sure that that happens. So, tonight we're looking at the immediate situation, but we also have to come up with a long-range plan of how we're looking at this, not just today, but next year and next year, because that number isn't going to change. It's going to continually get worse. I serve on the statewide committee for regional schools districts. We work as an informative and a legislative advocacy body to try and look at things. I do have a piece of legislation that's been filed by Senator Chandler that is specific to regional school districts, and it's a request to form a commission to study the regional school district foundation budgets, because our budgets are unique and different than an individual town or a city budget. So I'd like to present it to you because we need the finance boards of the towns, we need the Board of Selectmen from the towns working with us to get this commission in place. The number that we're talking about, the minimum local contribution number, which is the number that is strangleholding both towns and us, is the minimum local contribution, is not part of the Foundation Budget Review Commission changes. So the only way that we can help the town look at the number that you're being asked to pay is to address the formula for the minimum local contribution on a regional level. So I'd like to provide that legislation to you and ask for you to either individually support it or as a board support it. And we need to work with our senators, Senator Goby, Senator Fatman, to try and get support to get this. This actually was filed last year. It was not well advocated for. It was not thrown out, and it just didn't get the voice behind it to get it happening. But if we can get the commission in place, we can work at trying to help get the minimum local contribution number changed.
Now, would the commission cost us anything at this
No.
point?
The commission is just a commission of
Right.
getting people in a think tank. It has nothing to do, there's no monetary value attached to this commission. So there's no, okay, if you want the commission, how are you gonna pay for it? It's just, it's written for a group of people to get together to look at this foundation formula. There is a private citizen who has been doing a tremendous amount of research on this for regional school budgets. From Western Mass, he's done a tremendous amount of history, chronological history of going into the state DOR and DESI databanks and putting together the history. It makes a very good logical sense to everyone. It's been brought to DESI Finance, but we need to get the legislation in place so that we can make numbers happen and numbers change. And we need to get the commission in place so that we can get the legislation written and hopefully approach changing the MLC number.
Did anyone want to make a motion to support the commission?
Okay, no, I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of supporting the article as she wrote?
Aye.
On the Commission for Regional Schools? All in favor, it's unanimous. Now I had a question. Where'd it go? Oh, I think we had a discussion at the meeting at Shepherd Hill there about a month ago, and we've been kind of beating around the bush slightly. That part of the problem we have in these towns that we do right now is this is a farm town, and the rates were low. When the rates were low, they went into they put 2.5 in. Now as we're going into a dynamic and growing town with populations going up, we need more money than a 2.5 can actually get us. So the obvious thing is you're probably gonna have to go for 2.5. I mean, we're on TV saying that, but I don't have any way we can get more money. We have no money to give unless we raise the rates. And the only way we can raise the rate, beyond the 2.5, of course, is some sort of an override. So you may wanna start planning on how you might wanna do that, or how you might wanna bring it up.
I mean, if you bring it up, I've been in this town my whole life, you bring it up as an override on the whole town, it's not gonna pass. Tried this numerous times. Since most of our budget goes for the school, more than 50%. Maybe the school is the one that ought to bring it to the town as a school override.
And that's what we talked about at our meeting. And I think the key thing is that we would need the support from selectmen, we would need support from Fin Comm. And of course, it's not gonna be everyone's favorite thing. Somebody may not want to, but you know, I think for the good of the town and for the good of the schools and for the good of everybody, somebody's gonna have to fall on that sword at some point in time. But I think if we've got the support and these boards say, listen, this is what has to happen at this point in time, we've gotta do that. We're a community, that's what community does. If the community's struggling, why would we continue to struggle? Why do we wanna do this every year? Okay, we have to make a change, because what's happening isn't working. It's working, but there's not enough revenue. You know, one of our board members from Dudley has a great saying. We don't have a spending problem, we've got a revenue problem. The computers that Elaine is talking about that we're gonna lease are gonna be enough just to meet the minimum mandated from the state for testing.
Right.
But for 2 weeks of testing, guess what? There's no computers for learning. Those computers all get used. So that's a problem, and that really is a detriment to our education of our children. If that's not important to the townspeople, you know, whether, you know, I've been to many town meetings where I hear, well, you know, why should I have to pay for the education? Well, I'm sure that in some cases you had children in school at one point in time.
Well, he was educated himself, so.
Yeah, but, you know, I hear that a lot, and I frown on that, because at some point in time, that education of a child did something. And I think we have to, whether we have kids in the schools or not, we all have to pay our fair share. And I think that's important. So all I'm asking is, I have no problem going back to the committee and saying, listen, we've gotta drive this override, but I've gotta ask the town boards to get on board with it and give us that support, because if we don't have that support, it's stupid. I hate to use that word, but it is, it really is.
Have you done any of the math to forecast? I mean, you said that you know that the state ratio is changing over time, and you know that there are gonna be deficits next year and the year after. Do you have any feel for what those, is it gonna triple, or is it?
I talk to very smart people who are much smarter than I am regarding these numbers, and to some degree, we call it the little man behind the curtain, because there is no set number that they turn around and say that everybody's getting a 1.3% increase. It's like numbers get plugged in different places, and there's no necessarily rhyme or reason to it. So it's not a predictable thing, but those very smart people that I talk to think that if we could do the minimum local contribution fix, it might be around a $10 or $11 million fix. Which would be something that is a reasonable fix to change the health of not just us, but many towns. There is a lot of advocacy being done right now. Our organization is MARS, Mass Association of Regional Schools. We are looking right now at working on advocating across the state, across other regional school districts, to also put their voice to this commission piece so that we can work on addressing this funding formula. So regional districts, we have the detriment of we go to town meeting in the spring, and what our number is approved is the number that we live with for an entire school year, unlike a city or town that has an ability to say, well, we'll put these things off because with the expectation that we'll receive free cash in the fall, we can go in and backfill some of these things later. We can't. What we receive at town meeting is what we have to live with. There are a lot of, there is additional legislation, which I'll get that number and I can share that with you, that they're looking to put a commission in place to look at the element of unfunded mandates, which is something, this whole element of just the standardized testing and the technology piece is an unfunded mandate. You need to have these things in place, but there's no money in the budget. And not just us. So as a legislative voice to our towns, we really need to have you come to the table with us when we're talking to legislators, because it's important that you be in sync with us as we're talking to them about issues specific to regional schools. It is unique to outside of 128 than it is in the inner circle of the city and Beacon Hill. And it's crippling the towns, and to the point of, no one wants to hear the phrase that we need to do an override and we need more taxes. I know that we have a very strong advocate in Mr. Sage every year who turns around and gives his contribution if there was going to be an override, and we appreciate that very much. But on the same token, we're at the point in time that it will become an unfortunate choice that the money that you're going to be required to pay to the schools is going to turn around and impact town services and town government, because you're not going to be able, it's going to have to come from somewhere. So unless we work together to educate the community as to the need to be more proactive in not making that a big hurt, we're going to get to the place that it is going to be an extremely big hurt. Because they're gonna turn around and say that your minimum local contribution is going to increase $700,000 from last year, and you getting $400,000 of new revenue, then that $300,000 is gonna have to come from your budget. It's not growing our budget, and it's certainly
Right.
having a
That would be
negative
my
impact to
fear, is
yours.
that not only would that 300 have to come from our budget, but you're also going to be looking at an override, because there's going to be other costs that we can't cover. And
Absolutely.
double hit.
So I guess the reality is, and this is a reality, and I've worked really hard, and we work really hard as a committee to have these conversations, is it's not a question of whether or not an override needs to be done. Any logical person looking at this sees that the town is strapped, and there's no other way to do this other than to add some other level of income to it, okay? And if we're not a revenue generating town because we don't have industry, we don't have business, we don't have manufacturing and those other revenue sources, then we have to look at what we can do. Anything that we do is going to bring us closer to that number. And that has to be realized. One of the conversations that we were having in the Budget and Finance Subcommittee is that currently the district receives $2.7 million in hold harmless money. And that's money that the state comes in and backfills us for districts that are receiving, that are experiencing things like lower enrollment. The fact that you have to keep your building open whether or not it's full, it's 75% full or 50% full. So right now, we have $2.7 million of hold harmless money coming in supporting the budget, that if we didn't receive that, would be, again, going back to Charlton and Dudley saying that $2.7 million was gonna come from somewhere. So we have these, additional pockets that have come in that have helped, but we're still sitting here with numbers that are not palatable, or, something that's easily having a check written for. So it's not a question of today or where it is. It's, the reality is, this is the way education is required to be funded in Massachusetts. As a district, we have worked very hard, and I know Mr. Desto, Mr. Gilrain, the previous superintendent, have never want to be on town floor having a battle of it's the schools versus the towns. It's we're in here working together. We're all members of the community, and we don't want to have townspeople choose one over the other. So, our hope is that if it's an override for the benefit of the town as a whole, with education being a funding mechanism that will receive a benefit from that.
Okay. Any other questions?
One of the issues, and we saw this with Douglas, where they did an override, and then it got pulled in, and now they're right back at the same spot. And, we talked tonight about the same thing, that even if you did an override to get a certain amount, you're not gonna be able to get that 11 million that she's talking about, that's gonna get you to the 80-something%. Has there been any discussion legislatively that would allow, and I know that Governor Baker and Lieutenant Polito have been very big advocates of relooking at, they did the Municipal Modernization Act, which kind of rolled back a lot of things. They took out some traditional things that, to save money for towns. If they are clear and understand what they're actually doing on a statewide level, and if we're not the only community that's in the 50%, and we've gotta get to the 80%, that means there's a critical mass of cities and towns across the state that is having the same conversation every budget season. So has there been any conversation about either a legislative act or a local option that would allow cities and towns on this issue to have a multi-year override that's something that keeps it simple, that basically says, whatever that shift is for the next 5 years, till you get to the 82% or whatever it is, it is allowed to be outside 2.5, as a local option. Right now, we don't have that type of vehicle to take to the town and explain what you've just explained very well, thank you, Elaine, very well about what the issue is, which the state is shifting the responsibility over to the towns, and it's happening at such a rate that we can't absorb it within 2.5.
So I think you bring up an extremely good point, Robin, and it's not anything that I've heard on a legislative level that anybody is looking for something that would give that mechanism, because obviously the type of override that you would need and the amount of money that you would need to avoid having this conversation a year or two down the road would be not received well by anyone in town, and you would shoot yourself in the foot looking for that. We've had that conversation in our joint financial meetings. It's a very interesting component, and it's something that we do have another joint meeting on May 3rd, and Senator Fatman is committed to being there. It could be something that could be explored and thought about.
If you're thinking about an override anyway, I've never, just because the law doesn't allow us to do it today, that's never really stopped me. Legislative acts can be tailored for one town.
Right.
And oftentimes, if a town gets together and says, this is how we want to do it, then the state may follow suit, and they may even be more apt to pass a Dudley Charlton legislative act to see if it will work, or how it would be received before they would actually make it something as a local option across the state. But again, there appears that there should be a lot of legislators that are having the same struggle, and legislative act that would allow Charlton to, and you would have to do the numbers to figure out how far out would we have to go? Would we have to, would we educate the public and let them know about this shift and say, over the next 5 years, here's the target where we have to be? We're only asking to put outside the 2.5, the amount that the state is mandating. And within the 2.5, we'll do that extra, the extra additional monies that you asked for last year, which was 200 and how much? 70,000. This year you're asking for the 270,000 plus
Two cents,
another,
yeah.
you know, going into 550. So, you know, everyone understands we can't continue to do that, but if we could at least take that minimum requirement that they're shifting and take that outside the 2.5, that might be viable, and I
That's a
would
great
be
idea.
willing to help
Yeah.
you
You
work.
know, and one of the things we've done, Mr. Desto put together just some central mass towns that are in the same boat we are. And we, you know, grabbed school committees and some of their finance people and selected, and we had a meeting and said, here's what we're facing, what are you facing? So we're all facing the same
There's no
thing.
solution, at
But-
least this would give the town a solution.
But I'm saying those would be
Right.
other people who would probably be backers for that also.
It's a very appealing idea, just on the basis that if you had that mechanism in place, it's going to take that longer. It's gonna take several years legislatively to get this commission, to get the recommendation, to get the agreement, to get the MLC number changed. So unless we have both things working in sync, we're going to keep facing this issue every year. So I'm very intrigued by that idea of how we could put that together. And we could talk to Mr. Matthew about, you know, projections on numbers and what we would probably need to be looking at to be safe.
I mean, one of the things, going back to Dudley's override, you know, your percentage of increase just on the minimum was almost 2% this year. Theirs was 6.5%. That was a higher percentage than they had last year. So
We had
that's,
those same percentages.
yeah.
Right,
so-
you,
so
you,
you're-
you switched.
Correct. So you're gonna see, you know, yours are generally going down, theirs continue to go up, unfortunately. So, to answer Mr. Knossy's question, we don't know what that number may be next year, unfortunately, because there is no set pattern for it. It all depends on where they think you're at, and they put a number to it. So
Things
it's like
change.
throwing a dart at a moving target, basically.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Have a great meeting, enjoy. Thank you for having us.
Maybe you might get, if you just get a meeting with the two government and have a conversation like this and say, do we need to
Well, the other thing, you've got Dan Hill coming up too.
No, Dan Hill was
Oh,
yesterday.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
That's okay. To speak to that issue, there is becoming a very strong legislative voice for rural towns, you know, across the state, but it really started in the western part of the state because their enrollment numbers are dropping so dramatically. You know, we have that unique position ourselves, as regional districts, as towns. I would say that we don't necessarily fit in anything. We're not necessarily a rural town anymore, and we're not necessarily a true suburb or city either. We're kind of like the stepchild, and we need to grow as our legislative voice, which was the purpose of Mr. Desto reaching out to all of the communities that are facing these same problems to see if we could create a stronger legislative voice. So that instead of working at these things individually, we were working at these things collectively, so that we could have more of an impact for making these changes happen.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, good. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Karen, I think you're up. Sorry it took so long.
No, that's okay.
Probably didn't wanna follow that conversation.
So I think Darlene had sent you a
Yeah,
packet of information, so I don't know if you have questions on that, or,
well, that's the one we had before, and I believe we're looking at making the town clerk in the future full-time.
Yep.
Right?
well,
Right now, you're full-time as the assistant.
well, just because we switched
Yeah.
hours,
Yeah.
6 years ago. So when I become town clerk, I'll do the full-time hours and give the lesser hours to the assistant.
Right.
but we would love to have both of us have it. Right now, it's 39 hours that I work, so,
Yeah.
39 or 40 hours for both of us. It's just, our department has so many people always coming in, and with early voting that they started last year, which will be every other year, there's just certain things we just don't have time to efficiently get through. We do, eventually. Some of it, the filing, that we have stacks of, that we just can't in 39 hours for one person and 27 hours for the other. So we just, hopefully can have us both be there. 4 departments have 3 people in them in the town hall. The majority of the others have 2 full-time people. So ours, like we said, our department has a lot of foot traffic of people coming in, all day long. So we would, really like to have both of us be there.
I think right now we're set up for 89,000 for salaries.
What you did, I think you added increase,
8,000.
Yeah, 89,000, that's what we got right now. What line are you on? 112. It's on 112.
so you added $8,685 to the town clerk's salary.
Right.
And you left the assistant town clerk at 39. So the assistant town clerk right now is the same, so you haven't changed that. And you went from 41,315 from this year to 50,000 for next year.
Right.
They requested 60,000, so you're $10,000 shorter than what they asked for. And my explanation to them was, when you had talked about it, that you were trying perhaps to increase it over time.
Yeah.
But that the 8,000 was a stretch already.
Yeah, I think that's the situation we're in. And if we had more, we might be able to do more, but I think right now that's where we are. But I think you've got roughly 90,000, and you can adjust that.
Right, and that's what we'll do. We'll adjust
Yeah.
the hours, but, if we could.
No, I have
we
no
can-
problem. Come on in anytime, and if
Okay.
you wanna talk, not a problem.
Okay.
But I don't think there's any more, and it's how the school is
I know,
hitting us
I
with,
understand
so-
that. We just feel that of all the other departments that have minimum 2 full-time people in them, we're just hoping that we could have just as much as them, but,
I think we can
And,
see we can see in the future how it works out, and,
This year there's no early ballot.
this year there's not, no. Next year there will be with, I believe they're doing that for the state elections, we'll have the early. This year, right.
yeah, they're probably,
So when you put your budget request in for next year, remember,
Okay,
use
if
that
we
as
get-
a footnote, don't forget, we
Okay.
got.
All right, so, yeah, if we can get some more next year, that would be great, so, okay.
okay, well,
All
thank you
right,
very much.
thank you, thanks for your time.
Yep.
Well, I think that's about it at the moment. And now we're gonna be waiting for the school to come back
Yeah.
again.
I have one question.
Sure.
On that there. On those special years, instead of putting it into the budget, why can't we, as a committee or the town, get supplemental or part-time work for that person to take help with whatever they need to do, and then if it comes up again, we could do that again?
Yeah, well,
Is
she
that
could ask,
possible?
let's say it was a presidential election, she needs an extra person for
Another
3 weeks or whatever it
Because
is.
we've done it for the police, we did it
Yeah.
for when they needed extra help and stuff like that, I don't see that as not a possibility. But, to increase it and then not be able to, justify maybe, those extra hours, for the part-time, for the secondary individual, I don't know, maybe we could work something out like that, but, we'll have
That
to
sounds like a
see.
possibility, I think
Yeah.
that could be done.
My hope would be, right, so if she doesn't get it this year, she maybe gets it next
Yeah,
year, okay?
and then the next
And
year
then the
after that.
third year, I'm hoping this town
No.
gets big enough that we need 2 full-time people in that, but
Mhm.
that's.
Yeah, we
that's
need
a
money.
hypothetical. Right, I mean,
Well, we need new growth.
Yeah, and that's kind of up to the planning board and the economic, development commission to get things done, and maybe the assessor to a certain extent, but there's not much we can personally do about
Well,
growth.
Right now, you know, the town has to realize that if this continues with the schools, that every year there's gonna be an increase, and it's gotta come away from somewhere.
Well, what's
Whether
gonna,
it's gonna have to be some department in the town, or every department in the town, you know, they're gonna end up losing. The
Well, if-
people in the town are gonna end up losing, nobody else.
yeah,
Well,
except,
what you're gonna say, okay, you're gonna lay off 3 teachers, okay, we're gonna lay off 3 police officers,
yeah, but
and
it's,
that's what we're coming to.
they're getting the,
Make the choice, which one
Well,
you want.
no.
they're getting mandated by the
point-
state, so,
They're getting mandated by the state, Peter, to come up with this amount of funds because of that, the state formula. We have no choice, they have no choice on that.
Right,
But
we
the
have no
choice that we're
choice
gonna
of the
have,
amount of
but
money we got
the
coming in.
choice we're gonna have is that instead of taking the money and having it in the town budget, it's gonna go to the schools, and the town people are the ones that are gonna get hurt.
What's
Because
gonna-
we're not gonna, whether it's police, fire, or public works, or whatever it is, that's what's gonna get hurt.
well, if you look at the budget right now, that it's roughly 26 million, and they want, another 10 or 11 million over the next few years, there's not gonna be a town left.
Yeah.
There just isn't enough money to even keep the
You know,
town going,
that's the
except
state,
Robert.
and that's the state of, the other big thing was the mandates that they put in there that are unfunded.
Well,
You know,
yeah.
which are the biggest burdens on the towns, because they say you gotta have this there, and then they don't supply the money for it.
Well, I agree, they want you to do 80%, but they keep taking up part of that 80% with their own ideas, as opposed to what the school needs or what the school people
No,
think.
they start
need.
out with a certain percentage, and then they keep on taking away from that percentage till it gets down to a point where the town is taking up most of the cost of that unfunded mandate. And that's the problem, that's another big problem.
Yeah, if they got good ideas, they should be.
To the
to the
town,
taxpayer
yep,
without
absolutely.
giving any relief
Nope.
or
Yeah.
ability to raise those funds.
You know, it's a good idea, some of those things are a good idea in some places, but not in others. You know, you might have a class or a requirement over in, say, Amherst that they need real bad, that they're forcing on everybody, but nobody else needs it. But
So-
that's what the mandate does.
If our position then is, this is our budget, it's balanced, we're not gonna touch it, then to me, the next question is, are we going to support their going to the town meeting and asking for money? That's what they were asking for. They
Yeah.
basically said, look, you're not gonna give it to us, will you at least support us when we go to ask for it? And so I think
And
that's
the
the question
money
we
would
have to
have-
answer, right? And if they get it, it comes out of stabilization.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So we've got roughly 45,000 left in free cash. So you'd have to take about 200,000 out of stabilization, that puts us at 1 million.
Okay, but
Now, your stabilization is 800,000.
Oh, I thought it was 1 million too.
You took out, you never put anything back in. If you remember, that's one of the reasons that we are not, taking anything out of stabilization.
Yeah.
Because generally, when you get your free cash, it's usually between 400 to 700,000, somewhere in there. We use a portion of it for capital, and we place the money in reviews. We didn't get free cash this year, and at the last 2 meetings you've had, you've asked me for what the number is, and I keep saying, I haven't gotten it, and I finally got it.
Oh,
So
okay.
your actual free number cash, your stabilization fund balance
Which is
is
26.
867,600.
And that includes the 45?
The 45 is the free cash we didn't.
Yeah,
put
I know,
in,
yeah, I just
so
make sure
That's kinda still there,
So we got roughly 900,000, they want almost 300,000 of that.
and I was just gonna leave that 45,000 to kinda hang
Yeah.
there in case we need to make an adjustment
Yeah.
next fall,
I-
because something unexpected.
I don't see where we can get any more money. I mean, we took 400,000 out of the retirement system. We will put 500,000 in that as a OPS,
Okay.
and we took 400,000 out of that. And that has to be taken care of at some point. It's not gonna go away.
So
So if we decide that we're not going to support them to get before the town,
Well, what do you mean by support them to get before the town? Because I think I heard two different things. Are they gonna go to town meeting on the town meeting floor and try to open the budget and get money and they're asking you to
That's what
support
it
them?
sounds like.
that's what it sounded to me
Or
like.
are they asking you when they go for an override, they need everybody to support them?
Well, what I
understood it as to be an override.
I thought it was the
It was
override
the
also.
override, it wasn't going to the town to, that, they wanted to know if we were gonna support them if they went forward with an override. And I don't see that as a problem.
Right.
But for them to go to the town floor and ask to open the budget up to take it out of the stabilization, then I would question that as a way for us to support them.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think they were
Yeah.
asking you to.
No, they
Yeah,
weren't,
I-
they weren't, they were asking for an override, support for an override,
Yeah, I
which I think myself, on the committee, yes, we should do that, because it's not gonna get any better, it's gonna get worse, and if we don't start doing something now, when it comes in the long run, we don't wanna be like Dudley and end up with $100,000 in our stabilization and not being able to do anything.
What would,
So we have 900 now, and if we take almost 300 out, 260,
275 they're looking for, technically.
it's gonna
So
give
the
us
drop is,
5.
it would leave us around 600,000 left in stabilization if they went to the,
And then next year it's worse.
Yeah.
That's what the part that's.
Cause they're gonna go up another 2%.
That's
Yeah.
what scares me.
They're gonna go up another 2% next year, and then the next year after that, another 2%, another 2% after that, until they get to the 82%. Where are we gonna get the money? That's where you gotta start thinking about.
personally, I'm always opposed to an override, but in this particular case, I see no solution.
Yeah, but
Other
Dudley
than
didn't,
override.
Dudley do an override like last year, and now they're in a worse position?
That's
That
why
was
I think
Dudley.
it does need to be a multi-year, because they can't.
I thought that,
cannot
Yeah.
I thought that was an
expand.
excellent idea by Robin.
If it's 56%, they wanna be at 80, if the state wants us to be
Yeah.
paying 80-something percent.
82%, I thought it was,
Then
yeah.
you can't just go and get an override for that huge amount, because
Yeah.
it's
Never happened.
over time.
No, even if we gave them,
But if you can calculate it out, and then
Yeah.
do it multi-year, and the legislation would allow you to do that, and I'm gonna go back and see whether or not there are overrides that'll give you multi-year, so
Yeah,
you
that
can
would-
put a number in multi-year.
Yeah, 'cause that way,
Most
if,
of the time, it's just an annual, that's it, one time, that's it.
yeah, if we could raise it
But I
for,
will look.
for a number of 4% this year, and 4% the next year, and 4% the next year, until we kinda caught up. And I don't know what the number would be.
In one
You
vote,
can't do it
but
one
not
year.
every year.
No, you'd have to vote that so that you could do it every year, at whatever the calculated number would be.
if you gave them $1 million, they'd be back in 2 years with what more?
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
Right, the way it is right now.
Yeah.
And
Because
if
they
you
want-
did $1 million override,
Yeah, if we got $1 million override the first year, we'd give them all they want this year, pretty much what they want next year, and we'd be in the hole the year after.
that's right. In 3 years, you're in the same position.
That is a new number. I remember when we were talking about the shift back in 2008 or so, I think it was. I thought it was, we were at 40-something%, and we were supposed to get up to 56%. That was a new, I don't know if they changed that, but 80-something% is a new number to me.
Yeah, it's something we couldn't afford.
Because that's
Yeah, I never heard that neither.
for the state to be saying that they're not.
Can you look into that?
I will check that, but I thought it was more like a 58%.
Yeah.
That's what I thought too, cause we was
80.
getting close to it.
Perhaps we're talking about two different things.
Yeah, there might be other pieces inside of that, anyway, I don't know what they are.
My memory's the same as yours, Robin.
The 80-something% is huge.
Yes.
How can they take 80% of the town's budget? I mean, that's just not logical.
No, we have to pay
No,
80% of their budget. So if they're at 30 million between the two towns and what they get in
We're gonna pay
state aid,
24.
and the state is paying, 50% of that, and they wanna be at 80%, that's a huge shift between the two
Yeah.
towns.
A lot of money.
And how can you figure it out? Right now, like what Robin was saying, and they were saying, Dudley and Charlton have really flipped. We were up giving the higher rate a few years ago, and
Yeah.
we were struggling. Now, I remember back
Oh,
in
yeah.
2008, 9, and that, on the budget. Now it's it's even worse because we're giving less money and they're asking Dudley to give more, and they're the ones that are struggling a lot now, so
Yeah.
it's not a good thing.
Well, there's not much going on in Dudley. I mean, there's not much industry, it's pretty much all housing, residential.
And I thought we had gotten through Charlton's shift, and we were there because we were getting the lesser
Mm.
amounts, so I am definitely going to look at that. Mark Abrams, I don't know if you remember him, he has done quite a bit of work for the town, assisting us with the betterment process. He does do a class on chapter 70 and the shifts and all that. I haven't taken it in a while, and maybe it's time to take a look and see what they're doing. Because it's changing,
Because,
that
yeah, you
formula
don't-
is changing all
It's
the
changing
time.
every time,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's changing, and most of the votes come out of inside of 495.
Oh, absolutely, sure.
Well, you did dodge one bullet, you did not get any students and weren't charged for the charter schools going in Sturbridge. So, I mean, we could be adding that piece on top. Southbridge has got 800,000 of their students are going, I think the state's gonna make up maybe 500,000, but they're getting 200,000 more. Yeah.
Is, anyone looked
If
at,
we end up with schools going, students going to that charter school, we'll start looking at increases in our out-of-school district.
has anyone looked at expanding the Dudley Charlton Regional itself?
Or what?
Like adding in Sturbridge or Oxford or something like that, make it a larger regional?
Well, we have choice, don't we?
We have choice.
We have choice. We have choice.
Yeah, but they
There
don't
was
let
a town
many
that
in.
wanted to
What?
look at it, and I think
They
they
have,
said it.
they only accommodate so many slots.
Yeah,
And then once the slots are filled up, they don't take any more. But if they, why, they can't take more if they don't have the teachers to be able to accommodate those students.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's not many they take, it's only like 10 or 15.
Yeah, well, again, there's a determination factor on what they can afford and how many teachers they can have and the number of kids in the classroom.
How much do they get per student?
I'm not sure on that.
Whatever the state says it is per student.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, probably 10, 11,000.
Yeah, the only thing that they're not, if you go school choice,
He's not here.
if you go school choice, they pay tuition. The choice student has to supply his own transportation
Yeah.
to that school.
Well, that's something.
Yeah, not like the agricultural.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah, the agriculture ought to supply
That's
their own
where it's been
transportation too.
through-
No, I know,
Since it's been incorporated
but who
on
knows?
school choice.
That may change too.
Yeah, well, if it does, then it's, you might as well kill it down.
Yeah.
We'll get a new steel plant in. That ought to get them going.
We need more buildings.
The one industry.
You got allergies or a cold?
Oh, I got a cold.
Yeah.
You can have it if you want it.
No, I got allergies.
I'm trying to get rid of it, but
Okay,
So, do you
what's
want
next?
to do anything with the budget, or leave it as it is? What should
I think for now, we'll leave it the way it is.
I
Yep.
don't see any changes.
The most we could do is take that 45 and add it in, and that's just a piddling compared to what they want.
Nothing.
So that wouldn't really do much of anything. And,
Yeah, no, what we said last week, if they're gonna go, let them go for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's no more money to get, and they'll have to get it, well, I hate to take it out of stabilization, but whatever they do, and whatever the town votes, it votes.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? You got a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion adjourned, and it was 7:22,
Oh.
right?